What's the worst display of incompetence you've ever witnessed? Had one of my chefs chopping and blanching fries, a job usually left for whatever commis was on shift, but we were short that day so I got him on it. He had a large plastic container full of water and after he had chopped would dump the fries in there to soak the starch out. Usually you would drain them and then fry. Well, he just walks straight over to the fryer and dumps the whole thing in, water included. I'm in shock at this point but run over and drag him away and then lunge for the emergency electricity cutoff switch, hit that then move away. The oil fizzes for a few seconds and then just erupts and fills the kitchen with gallons and gallons of oil. One of the stupidest things I've ever seen happen in a kitchen. Man, you saved homie's life. Temporarily extended it. With folk like that it's only a matter of time. I was at a Subway and the person in front of me asked for a BLT. The employee just stared blankly until the customer said, "Bacon, lettuce, and tomato." The girl then grabbed some bacon and put it on the bread, but then just stared blankly again until the customer said, "Lettuce." After putting lettuce on the bread, the customer got a blank stare until saying, "Tomato." To this day, it's the dumbest employee I've ever seen. Probably Slingshot Tim, a guy I used to work with, who managed to slingshot himself into an office table during a meeting. Tim was the definition of an unnecessary hire. His dad was one of our most important suppliers at the time, so the boss was forced to hire him for a job he basically couldn't do, but also couldn't ever really be fired for. It was the moron's sweet spot. During one meeting with Tim, I saw him lean really far back in his chair during a meeting, far enough back that the chair started to creak loudly. So far so standard, but Tim had done this maneuver without turning the little knob thing under the chair to give himself a little slack, so he had to push really hard against the base of the table to stay in his casual position. It looked like a surprising amount of effort. Tim was visibly sweating to stay cool. Eventually, Tim couldn't take it anymore, and ended up slipping about 2/3 of the way into the meeting. Thanks to physics, the lack of tension shot his chair forward, throwing him into the conference table. He took the entire desk to the chest, shaking the projector enough to unplug it from the wall and spilling more than a few cups of coffee. It was the most hilariously loud and stupid thing I've ever seen in a meeting. Even people walking by the conference room completely stopped to witness this grown man turn himself into a human catapult. He picked himself up off the floor in a daze, then started hurriedly packing up his stuff amidst uproarious laughter, and ran out of the room. I'm not sure if Tim still works there, but I'm definitely sure the legend of Slingshot Tim endures to this day. There was a woman who survived a car crash, but was left for days in the car with her dead family because the police didn't come to check it out. She died in the hospital. A group of students at my workplace who did not realize, until they were taking a formal English exam, that their teacher had been teaching them the wrong book for 6 months. As a former student, that sounds like a complete nightmare. Like, how would you be able to answer any of the questions if you didn't study the right book? And oh God, the essays. I get anxiety just thinking about it. The Hungarian government trying to tax the internet. It was going to be a fixed rate per gigabyte. It was bafflingly stupid, really. I work with a Hungarian immigrant. All I have to do is say something like, "What do you know about the Hungarian government trying to tax the internet?" That gets him started on a 15-minute rant. I was assistant to a VP at a bank. One of my duties was to make him look good each Monday morning for the meeting. I would print out his homework from the past week and keep it all tidy so he could just rattle it off. I was doing contract work in Miami for a drug company making a product containing nitroglycerin. They had a chemist, Ph.D., who I thought did some odd things, but one fine day we had a meeting across town with him in it. It was a planned meeting. The subject material was known to all days before it. During this meeting, the good doctor gets up to make some point. This prompted him to start drawing a stick figure of nitroglycerin on the whiteboard. He drew 3 carbons. So far, so good. And then another, and finally a 5th. I looked at my boss. I'm a R&D engineer, physicist by degree, and he saw it too. Nitroglycerin doesn't have 5 carbon atoms in it. It has 3. While this might be a little nitpicky, this guy was the chemist for this plant, with Ph.D., and nitroglycerin delivery was the entire point of the product. I checked everything I saw from him after that lest it become my mistake. We have this chemical we have to inject in our process to make sure solids don't come out of the liquid. We have been warning this particular customer for months that the level of this chemical was low and dropping, and they better add some stat. Instead, they decide to use the Kramer approach and push it to the last drop. Now they have solids in all their tanks and pumps, causing them to have to shut down and clean out every piece of equipment manually, and losing production for about a week. That's a couple of $1 million down the drain. Good jobs, guys. I was getting my driver's license renewed in Chicago. I needed to get a vision check. I put my eyes up to the machine. The clerk said, "Please read the..." "Couldn't hear what number she said, line," I asked. "Could you repeat that?" Her response stamped my paperwork and said, "Go pay the clerk." Yeah, I just had mine renewed last month. Just as the clerk directed me to put my eyes up to the machine, a guy next me, literally 18 inches away, started reading the same line to his clerk. As a bit of a goof, I just repeated what he said, never really getting close enough to the machine to even look into it. Sailed right through, glad his eyes worked well. We, in Australia, recently had a national census. Government spent millions setting up a website encouraging people to use it. Only it couldn't handle more than 1 million queries an hour, and so crashed just after dinner time, roughly 7 p.m. when not surprisingly more than 1 million people just happened to log in on census night. They're now running ads to assure people they are competent enough to store all the private data gathered. Some Danish government body recently sent a CD with the personal information, including CPR number, which basically is all you need to know to get access to everything about a person in Denmark, to the Chinese somehow. The kicker? They're appreciate 5 million citizens in Denmark, so it was pretty much the most sensitive personal info on everyone. We were running out of stock space at work, so the company spent $3 million to renovate the stockroom, and by the end we lost stock space. I work in construction. Incompetence is a daily occurrence. In no particular order. Crane operator overcompensated and slammed the 35-ton air handler he was placing on the roof into the wall of the hospital. Everyone is complaining that there is no hot water to half the hospital and starts blaming my design. Okay, let me look. Well, idiot plumber put all of the check valves in backwards so no hot water was allowed out of the system. Medical gas certification company didn't check all the outlets on a line, just the last one. Well, he screwed up and read the gauges wrong. Passed the system and it went into operation. 2 weeks later, a patient is brought into the ER and requires oxygen. So they hook him up to the oxygen wall outlet. Only problem is that during construction, some dumbass got the lines crossed and the oxygen outlet was actually connected to the vacuum line. Patient was fine, after some well-deserved freaking out. Previous contractor did not reconnect the storm pipes under the slab before repouring the concrete. Every time it rained, water would bubble up through the floor tiles and flood the EKG lab. Hospital didn't investigate until a patient slipped. They had just been sending a dude with a mop to clean the floor. There are so many more. My dad sold industrial combustion systems, like the kind brick plants use. Customer called him up complaining the system he sold was crap. It kept going out and was a pain to try and keep a steady output. So my dad goes down and inspects the system. A valve was put in backwards. My dad pointed it out to the maintenance tech, who was responsible for installing it in the first place, on the down low, took the plant manager out to lunch. When they came back, the equipment worked perfectly. My dad had a very loyal customer inside the plant from that day forth, because the tech probably would have been fired, probably cost $1 million in lost productivity. I was at a restaurant. The young waiter was clearing dishes. He dropped all the dishes right by the table, like he didn't even make it a few feet. Starts stacking them up again, is super embarrassed. And then he drops them again. His superior comes over and sends him back into the kitchen and clears all the dishes. I used to work in a restaurant where champagne was served in a bucket full of ice on a stand next to their table. A new waitress working her first night knocked it over, and as it was a hard-tiled floor, the ice scattered all over the entire restaurant floor. In her panic she tried to pick it all up but slipped over on it at least 6 times. No one laughed, no one cheered. Everyone just watched on in absolute silence until she started crying and walked out. I was a supervisor in a retail store many years ago as one of my first jobs. There was a new guy who was actually really good, but for some reason, when trying to stock the shelves one day, he just kept dropping everything. Like a lot, it was pretty funny. I was watching him from across the store, then a customer walks up to me and says, "You know, I think it's really nice you guys hire special people here." I kept a straight face until she left, then I don't think I've ever laughed that much at work since. The look on his face when I told him about it was priceless. There was a guy who was famous among electricians for his stupidity. The best by far was when a foreman asked him to clean out that trailer and burn everything. He cleaned it out, then burned down the trailer. I would be too pumped up about being given permission to burn a trailer to analyze whether I had definitely been given permission to burn a trailer. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.